Jesus is remarkable. And he was absolute perfection when it comes to relationships. He was masterful. Masterful at granting access where he shouldn't, it seemingly shouldn't, where it was unexpected, but at the same time, he's masterful at how he set boundaries. And I want to show you an example in Mark chapter 5. Look at this. It says this. It says, while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, not exactly Jesus' biggest fan. Right? Pharisees, Sadducees, synagogue leaders. Jesus had a few clashes with these dudes. Like, not exactly Jesus' biggest fan. He's not there because he's a big fan of Jesus. He's probably there to be a critic and to watch out and to be jealous of. And we see that all over the place. But anyway, regardless of that, while Jesus is talking, people come and from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader, and they say to him, "Your daughter is dead." They said, "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." So Jairus isn't here this day to be a critic. Jairus is there this day because he's lost all hope. And his daughter is deathly ill, and he's going to Jesus for healing. And it's amazing because these critics, all of a sudden, it's amazing. So some of the people that are most outspoken critics of God, like, don't panic over this, because sometimes the most outspoken critics, there's always hope.
Yeah, that's true.
And when they need it, they know where to go. Right? And Jairus was that. And Jesus didn't say, well, you're a critic, and Jesus didn't restrict access, and you've been irresponsible, and you've been a critic, and all the rest of it. Didn't shut him up. He looks at Jairus, and he says, hey, he doesn't ignore him. He doesn't deny the problem. He says, don't be afraid, just believe. Jairus is like, believe in what? My daughter just died. What do I need to believe? Don't be afraid, just believe. And then this is what it looks like. It looks like Jesus just gave full access to somebody it looks like an imbalance, somebody who's not responsible. And so we're looking at this and going, well, there it goes again. Jesus is perfect and I can't do that. But hold on. The very next verse says this in verse 37. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. He did not let anyone. He did not let Mary, Martha. He did not let Matthew and Thomas and Andrew, the brother of Peter. He did not let Judas. He did not let any of the 12. He did not let any of the close followers around him. He did not let his best friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He did not, who was probably with him at this time. He did not let anyone follow him except for Peter, James, and John. And you look at this and going, well, why? Is that cruel? Why can't we come along? Can you know what I mean? We're all excited because it's Peter, James, and John. Like, but what about Matthew sitting there and going, whoa? Or Andrew going, you let Jesus, I introduced Peter to you. I was first. Yeah. Come on, how come? Why can't I come? And it looks like cruelty, but why? But why did Jesus? It wasn't cruel. Jesus wasn't being cruel. This was Jesus giving a level of access to those who would later have higher levels of responsibility. And we would see later, we know the end of the story. At the end of the story, when the church is birthed in the book of Acts, who are the leaders of the church? Mostly Peter and John. James was right there too. These guys had more responsibility at the birth of the church. And Jesus allowed, knowing this and training them, Jesus allowed more access, give them more access. And right after this, these same three went the Mount of Transfiguration. These three, and the rest of them didn't again. Again, Jesus is balancing the access with the responsibility. And then look at this. Then he goes on, he says this. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, and people were crying and wailing loudly. And he went in and said to them, why all the commotion? And they're like, duh, Jesus, 12-year-old girl. Like, this is injustice. Like, what do you mean all the commotion? She's died. And Jesus says, why are you crying? The child is not dead, but asleep. Look at this. It says, and they laughed at him. And they're in the midst of mourning, and they have enough that they laugh at him. And Jesus, watch this, Jesus did not rebuke their laughter. He did not yell at them. He did not get angry. Jesus kind of ignored all that. What did he do? How was his response? They just proved themselves to be irresponsible with this level of action. What did Jesus do next? After he put them all out, Jesus, after he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, Peter, James, and John, and went into where the child was. Jesus takes the number and goes, and he gives, what's he doing? Is he being cruel? No. He is giving access to the level of responsibility. He just limited, he didn't kick them out, he just limited their access for this particular event. He didn't shut them off and never speak to them again. He didn't yell at them or be angry with them. He just decreased their level of access to correspond with the level of responsibility. He just simply set a boundary. That's it. And then, what does he do next? He took the girl by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old, as they were completely astonished. Who's completely astonished? The father, the mother, Peter, James, and John. That's who's in the room. She just gets up and starts walking around, and they're like, and then watch what he does next. And we don't know, in between this verse and the next verse, we don't know if the girl went outside at this time. We don't know if they just stayed in the room for a little while. I'm assuming that they're like all the people are still outside weeping and wailing. We assume that they all of a sudden all just kind of rushed out of the room or like, look. And what does Jesus say next? Look at this. He says, he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this. And he told them to give her something to eat, which I'm thinking they probably did. He gave them strict orders to not let anyone know about this. Now, I've often wondered, anybody else have read the stories of Jesus and why sometimes Jesus told them, hey, go tell everyone, go report to everyone. And there's other times where Jesus was like, don't tell anyone. Here's one of those times where he's like, don't tell anyone. And I often wonder, why did he say don't tell anyone? And why did different times he say go tell everyone? And here's what I believe. I believe that Jesus understood that the people that were there had already proven irresponsible, that they weren't going to be responsible with sharing the message in the proper way and putting it into the right context. And so he said to people who wouldn't have responsibility, he didn't give them access to be able to tell the story. He set another boundary.